wellnessfromthecouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
You're listening to A Quirky Journey, the Healthy Family Podcast with your hosts Jo Whitton and Leah Follett. Hello everybody and welcome to A Quirky Journey. Join us as we share our family's journeys to good health. You'll find plenty of inspiration, tips and recipe ideas, as well as stories from everyday people who've struggled and overcome health problems and diet challenges in their own families. I'm Jo Whitton, author of the blog and book Quirky Cooking, and I'm here with my friends. Today we've got my co-host Leah Follett, and we also have a special guest, Samantha Bulloch, who is a naturopath down in Brisbane. Welcome, Samantha.
Hey Jo, hey Leah, it's so lovely to be here. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited.
We're excited too, aren't we, Leah?
Very excited.
Yes, we have lots of questions for you. So I'm going to let Samantha introduce herself and give a bit of her background. She's a very knowledgeable naturopath and she has got some amazing things to share with you. So go ahead, Samantha. Hello.
So hi everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So my story sort of started 40 plus years ago. I was born in a little tiny country town. I was born 3 months prem, and really in my toddler years, as a result of being born so premature and never getting breastfed, I started out life with quite a few gut issues and lots of allergy issues that persisted throughout my childhood and my teen years. And it really wasn't until I went into my naturopathic training after the birth of my beautiful daughter Emrys that I started to really unravel that for the first time in my adult life. I come from sort of quite a medical family. My mum is a nurse and I spent 15 years in nursing before I trained to be a naturopath, sort of working in oncology. So my background really is in environmental medicine and children's health. And then for me, having home birth, breastfeeding long term, it just, as motherhood does, it completely changed my whole life and my perspective on life. And it sort of really set me on a path of looking at alternative medicine for our family's primary health care. And it was something that I'd always felt an affinity for, but at the time that I left high school and medicine was really in its infancy then, and so that was the primary reason that I decided to do nursing, and then sort of waited until the time was right for me to make the transition into naturopathic medicine as a full-time thing for me. So I've been in practice now for nearly 20 years. I've always specialised in women's health because my journey with my daughter Emrys and mothering really inspired me to support other women, and I've been specialising in reproductive endocrinology and fertility and birthing and bonding ever since that point. So, yeah.
Where were you when I needed you?
Yeah, me too.
Where were you when I
have
should
so
have one
many
of you
women who
in
say that.
every doctor's office.
Every hospital.
Every hospital, actually, doing talks at high school level.
My way, we'd actually fully integrate. Yeah, and I think that there's a great need for nurturing and supporting, young women right from the time that they have their very first periods about their reproductive system and how it works and what's normal and what's not normal. If I was queen of the world, I would have that as part of the ordinary, education system. I think it's so important that mums know how to support their girls through that process of, adolescence and puberty, and also girls know how to do that because, I don't know about you guys, but, because of all of my allergies, because of some of my underlying health concerns, by the time that I hit my teenage years, I had absolutely awful acne. And, when my mum, took me to the doctor about it, because of course it was really affecting my self-esteem and I was just having a really horrible time with it. And, the way that GPs at that point in time treated acne was to put girls on the pill.
Yeah.
So I was put on, a very high dose oral contraceptive pill at the age of 15, and I was also given very high dose antibiotics for 3 years.
Wow.
And I took them every single day.
3 years?
Yep, nobody knew. I can still remember my dad used to buy the antibiotic involved. It used to come in huge jars.
Wow.
And, I took that for 3.5, 4 years. Non-stop.
What happened to your gut?
Well,
I'm so fascinated by what
it totally, the combination of the pill for me and antibiotics really trashed my gut.
I can imagine.
And it set me up for some pretty major hormonal issues that, I really didn't start unraveling until I was in, like I said, the first year of naturopathic medicine. And, we had brilliant training in nutrition, in food, in diet, in hormonal health, in neurological health. And I started to join all of the dots. And of course, that's when I started to put myself on gut repair diets in the form that they used to be then. This is way before the GAPS diet or anything like that. But I basically went off grain and went off dairy.
Yep.
And went off soy and started to work with nutritional medicine and herbal medicine to heal my gut and recover myself from, what were pretty severe allergies. I was the kid that woke up and just sneezed and sneezed and sneezed and then sneezed some more every single morning.
We could be sisters.
I know we could be. We are soul sisters, sweetie. So, my childhood nickname was Sneezy.
Oh,
and that,
I used to get teased too.
Yeah, so, and it was sort of a family joke that, I was just the highly allergic one. And, and my mum and dad were very health aware and very health conscious. Same. I was really lucky that my mum always cooked really beautiful food. She's an amazing cook. Yep. And so I had the benefit of being raised on what was, what is a whole food diet. Yeah. But we just didn't have the awareness of food-based allergies and diet and the gut and the immune system at that point. Nobody knew. It was one of those areas where you don't know what you don't know. Yep. So my parents didn't even know what kind of questions to ask in investigating it because there was just no consciousness of it at that point. Yeah. So, I lived on antihistamines, antibiotics, and the oral contraceptive pill. It was not pretty at times. Let me just share that with you. Wow. I'm sure that my mum could tell you horror stories about my mood.
Oh, wow.
I'm lost for words. I'm sitting here and I keep blocking in and out of, oh, that's right, I'm actually part of a podcast. I'm sitting here listening to one as if I'm just listening. I'm shocked. I cannot believe that from such a young age that's what you were given or dealt with, or how you were dealt with, rather.
It hasn't, the really scary thing for me is that it's still very common protocol for girls to present to their GP with acne, with hormonal instability, with PMS, with period pain, with bleeding issues with their period, and the treatment of choice is the pill.
Yep.
And antibiotics still are a treatment of choice for adolescent acne. And we have a whole community of women and concerned mums who want the very best of care for their girls and understand that, those things are potentially serious for their children and that they need to have them addressed, but not understanding the long-term health effects of both of those things. And, sadly for me, I see the long-term consequence of that in my clinic when women in their 30s and 40s and now even in their middle 20s are presenting with major fertility diagnosis. And it's incredibly, incredibly common for me to take a history and hear a woman say to me that she went on the pill sometime between the ages of 12 and 15.
Wow.
And that she's never really come off.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And that's common.
Scary.
Okay. Can we talk about, just for the parents out there that have got these children that are just starting or haven't started menstruating yet, can we talk about how you would approach or go into the investigation of what their cycle will be like or what it should be like, because there's no common ground about what normal is and what's to be worried about or what isn't, or those sorts of things that they could potentially have set up in place.
Where to start?
Where to start? Before they start menstruating, before they've got the problems and all those other things, what things should parents be looking out for in their children? What's alarm bells, and where do you go from those teenage early years?
Look, I think the most important thing to start getting a recognition of is, what constitutes a normal menstrual cycle, and so many women don't actually understand that. And if mums don't understand what a normal healthy cycle is, then how can they support their 12, 13, 14-year-old girl in going through that themselves? So really, when we're looking at, that beginning of puberty, we're looking at, a menstrual cycle that is stable and rhythmical. We're wanting to make sure that they're having a good, stable 28-day cycle. We're wanting to make sure that they're ovulating at mid-cycle and that they're understanding what ovulation is. We're wanting to see an absence, really, of any kind of period pain. It's within the boundary of, a couple of hours to maybe one day at the most of period pain. We're wanting to see good cervical mucus production. Okay. So we're wanting to see
the best way to support your young daughter or your teenager is to make sure that you're working efficiently first, so then you know what it is and what to expect, so then you can communicate that better.
Yeah, and look, for so many women that I see in clinic, they are in their middle 20s all the way through to their middle 40s, and they don't have any overview around what normal is. Yeah. So for women to become much more present and much more aware of their own cycle, I always recommend a couple of books. I recommend Francesca Naish's book, Natural Fertility, which teaches women about what's normal in a cycle.
Oh, that's good.
And how to interpret that. And that's something that I teach women in my naturopathic sessions. I teach them how to actually do symptothermal charting, and that's layered with lunar fertility, so they know exactly when they're ovulating. They know exactly when they can expect their period. They know exactly what normal is, and then they're in a powerful place to understand, well, what isn't normal. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then from that place, if you're really empowered, then you're able to actually support your teenager to go through menstruation and establish her menstrual cycle from a place of confidence and a place of empowerment and a place of, I guess, for want of a better word, honouring, because there's so much menstrual cycle shaming and judgment in our community. It's considered to be something that's bad, that's stupid, that's wrong.
That's limiting.
That's limiting, that's contracting. I regularly see girls who deliberately manipulate their pill so that they don't have a period.
I remember one of my friends when I was in my late teens doing that when she travelled. And I thought to myself even back then, that doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem like a good thing to do.
Yeah, and, Jo, your instinctive kind of intuitive hit on that was actually completely correct. Yeah. But, we live in a society now and a culture of women that it's all about convenience and it's all about pleasing and it's all about trying to make as little impact as possible to a certain degree. And we're not actually educating our girls to feel empowered and supported around their cycle. I also recommend a book called A Blessing Not a Curse. It's written by a really lovely friend of mine, Jane Bennett. And that is basically, it's a book for mums to support them to understand the menstrual cycle and give them some overview about how to support their girls through that.
And to get these books.
I'll happily send you the information on them, and they're freely available on the internet and from Amazon and Fish Pond and things like that.
I'll put the links up on my blog.
So look, really for girls who are being offered the treatment of the oral contraceptive pill or, antibiotics for their skin or PMS or whatever, from a naturopathic point of view, there are so many options available to girls. You've got beautiful nutritional medicines, you've got homeopathic medicines, you've got herbal medicines, you've got a lot of really teenage-friendly diet lifestyle strategies that you can employ, understanding that, adolescence is a really special time of development and kids do go off the boil with lifestyle, but there are always empowering ways to work with girls and kids. And, I love that. It makes me really happy to support young girls at this level, because I know that I'm setting them up to win for their whole fertile life, and I'm potentially preventing them from being in my office in a decade or a decade and a half, having been diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome or endometriosis. And I think if I could touch a little bit on that, for me, the primary pitfall of being put on the oral contraceptive pill early is that if a girl has not had ovulation assessment, the potential risk is that she's not yet ovulating. Her hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis or communication pathway is not yet established. And if you take the oral contraceptive pill at that point, she is putting herself at a very high risk of not ever actually establishing that.
Wow.
Or coming off the pill in 10 to 15 years' time and then having to do a lot of really deep work to re-establish that natural communication pathway. And then the other potential pitfall of the pill is that because you're receiving anywhere between, 15 to 17 times the dosage of your own endogenous or self-created hormone levels, it creates a very kind of a suppressive effect in which your own hormone receptors and your hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis actually downregulate. And you can have polycystic ovarian syndrome, you can have endometriosis grumbling under the surface of that drug manipulated cycle without care and without actually seeing the symptoms. And what I see in women, between their middle teens and middle 20s is that even on the pill, they still have horrible period pain. And so, the orthodox care for that is not to investigate further.
No, it's
and
give them
actually
some more
start
medication.
Well, it's to
that's
give
what
them
happened
pain
to me.
relief.
It's
to give them pain relief. It's to give them anti-inflammatories, and usually in escalating dosage ranges. And this is not to demonize orthodox medicine. I'm very much an integrationist. Having had a 15-year background in nursing, I have a great deal of respect and appreciation and gratitude for the whole orthodox medical system, but it isn't doing us a service at the level of preventative health care, and it's certainly not doing us a service at wellness care, because that's not its forte. No. Its forte is actually emergency crisis medicine. That's what it's designed to do. And so when it's faced with some of these underlying chronic health concerns, it fails fairly miserably. And it doesn't have the resources that it needs to address it. So, all that it can do is basically use, I guess in naturopathic medicine we use a bit of a controversial word, it suppresses that symptom. So an anti-inflammatory shuts down the inflammatory process. An analgesic shuts down the pain signaling process. An antidiarrheal actually stops diarrhea in its tracks, but it's not necessarily dealing with the underlying cause that's created that in the first place.
Band-Aids.
And for fertility, it's actually critical. It's critical to know that you have a family history with fertility challenges in your family, and so much can be cared for and supported throughout adolescence so that it doesn't even have to manifest in your 20s and 30s. And that's something that I'm really passionate about, is educating women and supporting them to safeguard and protect and nurture their fertility so that at a time in their life when they actually want to conceive, they can.
Yeah.
Rather than, coming out of a place of lack of confidence, lack of awareness, lack of education, and then ending up in my clinic room, frankly, in sobbing tears because they've been trying to conceive, they've gone through IVF unsuccessfully, and they're, sitting somewhere between 35 and 45, and they still haven't conceived a desperately wanted, needed, and cherished little bubby.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking. So can you explain to us what is the meaning of preconception care, and just give us a bit of your ideas on it?
Okay, sure. So preconception care it's a process that both partners in a couple ideally undertake together as a team. Yeah. And it's based upon some pretty fundamental science. It takes 4 months for the ovary to go through several cycles of maturing an egg. Mm-hmm. And it also takes 4 months for the sperm to be produced in the testicle right from their very, very beginning, what I like to call baby stage, all the way through to, I guess, what I would call university students graduating. So basically what happens then in preconception care is that we're taking great advantage of that biological flow that happens. It's a biological imperative in the body. It's set into our genetic coding that this is the way it happens, in a similar way that we replace and replenish the lining of our gastrointestinal tract, or we replace our hair, for instance. Our hair has a genetic growth set point. So all of the tissues in the body have their own little rhythm and their own cycle and their own sort of strategic plan of growth and development, and eggs and sperm are no different. So preconception care really takes full advantage of that and works to correct any underlying functional problems in terms of hormonal signalling, neurotransmitter signalling, communication between the different parts of the reproductive system, and then actually creating really sound building blocks that actually create the physical tissue of that egg and that sperm. Because at the very moment of conception, your baby's genetic blueprint is laid down permanently. And preconception care gives parents an enormous level of power and autonomy to actually affect the outcome of their children's health in the very, very long term. So we then get the chance to create really healthy, vibrant, structurally sound, functional ova, and exactly the same for sperm. So that at that moment of conception, the DNA blueprint that's laid down for that developing little baby is the very best health that it can possibly be, and that its genetic coding is really as sound and as healthy as it can possibly be, because the vast majority of diseases have a genetic component. We understand that by looking at, family histories. There are families in which cardiovascular health is a problem, arthritis, autoimmune disease, fertility. There's a genetic component, and we have the power with lifestyle, with diet, with exercise, with stress management to either switch on or keep off those little genetic switches that will either turn an illness on or off.
Fascinating.
And so, it's pretty amazing. I love it because it's so empowering.
Yeah.
And there's
Sam,
a lot
can I just ask?
Sure.
The nervous nanny in me just popped into my head and just went, well, what about all those people that accidentally conceived or didn't put in all this forethought into preconception? How do we bring them back into the care plan, just with that gene expression thing? Not to say like they haven't missed the boat or anything.
No, absolutely not. And that's a really important point, Leah, and I'm really glad that you raised that. I have a really strong belief, and it's based upon my clinical experience, that everything is recoverable, everything is healable, because the epigenetic codings are so triggerable by lifestyle, exercise, diet, and what I call emotional and mental well-being. We have the opportunity to completely down-regulate those things for children and babies, and supporting them with breastfeeding, supporting them with nutrition and diet, supporting them with naturopathic medicines if appropriate is so it's so fundamental. So let me give you an example of a couple that I've worked with. They basically went through IVF because both of them were carriers for cystic fibrosis, and they knew that when they conceived their twins that both of the twins would be born with CF. And we knew that going ahead of time. So all through her pregnancy, we worked with homeopathy and herbs and nutritional medicines to actually down-regulate that genetic coding. And then as soon as the bubbies were born, again, we did homeopathic care, we did nutritional medicine, we did herbal medicine for them, literally from the time that they were newborn. And they have not expressed cystic fibrosis anywhere near to the extent that the children born at the same time have. In fact, their pediatrician regularly contacts me and says, I don't know what you're doing with these kids, but you should keep doing it. Because they don't get the chest infections. They don't end up in hospital with bowel obstructions. They just don't. They're basically, we're keeping them as healthy and as happy as we possibly can, and we're using naturopathic medicine as wellness care for them. So that then we can reserve the orthodox medical care for them if we need it in an emergency, and then it works really well for them. So, in the first 2 years of their lives, when, children of that age and children with CF would be normally expected to have multiple chest infections requiring, multiple doses of antibiotics, they didn't have one chest infection between them.
That's amazing.
So that's an enormous increase in their quality of life as children, but also for any of us who are mums who've had 6 children, there's nothing more stressful than sick children.
Oh,
do you think those rules can then apply to other genetic or autoimmune diseases as well, not just CF?
Absolutely. And look, I think that the important thing to realise is that, if there are genetic issues, then that's something that you work with in the long term. And it's not always possible to completely resolve that. So I'll use myself as an example. I shared at the beginning that I was born, 3 months premature. As a result of being born so preemie, I was in a humicrib for 3 months. And at that point, they used to hyperoxygenate premature babies.
Can you explain that? Hyperoxygenate, what do you mean by that?
They basically used to saturate us with oxygen because when you're born prem, your lungs aren't fully developed yet. And so the benefit, obviously, is that it kept me alive, which I think is a really important thing. And so do my parents.
You've got a big message to send.
But, the pitfall was that because I was getting so much oxygen, the tiny little blood vessels in my retina, which is the back of your eye, which is like the receiving mechanism of light into your eye, that didn't develop. So I was born with, as a result of being preemie, I had what's called, it's a huge word, it's called retrolental fibroplasia, which basically means that I have a lot of scarring on my retinas, and it makes them fragile, and it makes me very short-sighted. And so, for most of my childhood, I had some serious issues with my eyes. I was blinded for a little while and, recovered from that. But, I came into my adulthood with some fairly significant eye deficits or sight deficits. Now, actually, one of the things that propelled me into naturopathic medicine was because when I was 15, I was sort of seeing my eye specialist. I used to have to see him every 6 months or at the very least once a year. And he sat me down when I was about 16 and had the talk with me, which basically said, look, I want to warn you that by the time that you're in your middle 30s, you'll probably be completely blind.
Wow.
And me being me, internally, I didn't say this out loud, but I can share with you that I said some very, very bad sailor language. And basically, politely, I said, well, that's not going to happen to me. Yeah. And I made, at that point, I can remember making the decision, sitting in the chair, that I was not going to be, I was not going to have my life determined by what that doctor believed to be true and what he understood to be true. And so that was, one of the major things that led me into naturopathic medicine, for want of, for a couple of other things. Yeah. And as a result of doing naturopathic medicine, I've now kept my eyes completely stable for the last 20 years.
Wow.
My sight has not degenerated at all. My retinas are now in better shape than they've ever been before. And this is the most hysterical thing. I won't mention the doctor's name because he's a very, very prominent eye surgeon in WA and actually heads up a couple of institutes and things like that. But I go and see him still. He's known me since I was a little tiny girl of about 5.
Yeah.
And he has always said to me, I don't believe in this quack medicine that you do, but I think you should keep doing it because obviously you're not blind yet, which is just, it's absolutely hysterical.
Wow.
And I've had conversations with him and I've said, are you interested in knowing what I do? And he's like, no, not really.
Oh, that's crazy. He could be helping other people.
That's so sad that he doesn't want to know. He could be passing that on to other patients.
Oh, wow.
So, the take-home message of that is that, I was born, or as a result of my prematurity, I was sort of gifted, for want of a better word, with a potentially, life-altering eye condition. Yeah. And I've successfully worked with that consciously and deliberately so that it hasn't actually manifested to its full degree. And that opportunity is available to anybody. Yes, I still wear glasses. I still have a major deficit of sight in my left eye. If I take my glasses off, I'm functionally blind in that eye. But I still live as a person who's fully sighted. And, I've just outed myself to, many thousand quirky cooking people. But, under normal circumstances, nobody knows that I have this eye problem.
I think that's such an encouragement for people to know that.
I don't operate in the world as a partially sighted person. I operate in the world as a person who has the very best sight that I can have. Yeah. And I never let that impact me to the very best of my ability. And, that just for me is a story of hope. It's a story of optimism, and it's a story of empowerment to say, no matter what you have been born with in terms of a health challenge or potentially a disability, there is always a path forward for you to actually make the very, very best of your health. And yes, you still may have some limitations that you're going to have to negotiate with, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be defined by a health condition. And I talk specifically around also the fertility issues, polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, unexplained infertility, pelvic scarring, all of those things define women, and they make them feel less than, they make them feel traumatized, and it doesn't have to be that way. It can be another way. And, I love supporting people at that level. It makes me really happy.
Wow. It's just quite fascinating. I think I've got a good idea. I wish I knew all this, obviously, before I ever had kids. I had no idea about preconception care until I'd had all my kids. And then one of my friends got married and decided to start trying for a baby, but not yet because she had to do the preconception care first. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? So that's pretty sad because I know it would have helped my kids a lot if I had have worked on healing my gut before they ever came along. Can you explain a little bit about the link between gut health and how you go with fertility and everything?
Yeah, I can. And I just want to unravel that a little bit for you, Jo, because I think it's really, really important that the women who are listening don't feel completely demoralized if they haven't done preconception care.
Yeah, that's right.
The take-home message for me is that everything is healable, no matter what, without exception, and that it all starts right now. It starts with the decision that you make today.
That's right. Every day is a new day.
Exactly. And, you're already, because you're committed to your family at such a high level, and you're doing gaps, and you're doing all of the naturopathic work that you're doing and the health coaching work that you're doing, you are going to be down regulating those genetic blueprints that all of your kids have been born with.
Yeah.
And you're setting them up to win into their adulthood with the least possible sort of manifestation of health concerns that they can possibly have. You're doing for your kids what I did for myself as a naturopathic student in starting to take care of my retina. I recognize that, the lottery of life, sometimes the chips fall where they lay, and you don't always get a choice at that point. Sometimes you have the choice much later.
That's right.
My parents have agonized over that, and they've said, what did we do something wrong? Should we have done something different? Should we have not let you have the antibiotics and the steroids when you were a little baby? No, absolutely not. My parents and the medical team that took care of me, frankly, they saved my life.
Yeah.
If I hadn't have had that, I wouldn't be here.
That's right.
Because the 4 other babies that were born at the same level of prematurity that I was, they all passed away.
Wow.
I'm the only one that's here to tell the tale. And I think that it's incredibly important for anyone who's listening that they still come away from this podcast feeling really empowered.
Yes.
It's about what you do today.
That's
and
right.
the gut is the center of your health and well-being. Every building block for tissue healing and repair, every building block for making the tissues and the organs and the systems of your body is created in the gut.
Yeah.
We're basically chemical beings. And so everything in our body is chemistry. So when you start taking care of your gut and cherishing it and nurturing it and feeding it whole, clean, vibrant, live food, you're making a major difference to your health and well-being. All of my fertility clients, without exception, are on therapeutic diet protocols, whether that's an autoimmune protocol, whether or not that's GAPS, whether or not that's, FODMAPs, whether or not that's some form of hypoallergenic diet. It doesn't matter, because we understand that your diet and your health and well-being are so foundational. Fertility is an outflow of overall vitality and well-being.
Yeah.
And so when you're working with any kind of fertility or reproductive issues, you have to come back to the gut. And I spend quite a lot of time in my consults, especially at a first visit with my clients, because, I hammer on about their diet, and I hammer on about their gut, and they're like, Sam, I'm here to see you about my periods, or I just want to get pregnant. And I'm like, I know you're here about that. And we have to sort of simultaneously do work on the gut at the same time as we heal and nurture and nourish the reproductive system and the endocrine system. So, to go back to preconception care is a layering. It's looking at the spiritual, emotional and mental space and capacity to allow a baby to come in and be conceived. Then it's looking at lifestyle, diet, exercise and stress management protocols that actually set you up to win. Not only set you up to conceive a really healthy and happy baby, but to set you up to win for your family life. Because one of the things that women who have what I fondly call baby brain forget is that after a pregnancy comes a baby.
I completely forgot about that. I was only focused on the baby, not on the 5-year-old I've got now.
Exactly. And that's a 30-year journey. And I like to set families up to win so that they come into that incredibly sacred, special, amazing neonatal period with a newborn baby, or with their second newborn baby, or their third or fourth or fifth newborn baby if they're blessed enough to have lots of kids, with grace, with power, with strength, and that they are actually creating the foundation in preconception care and pregnancy care of a really healthy, functional family. And that the baseline of that is stress management, it's relationship, it's communication, it's diet, it's lifestyle, it's where you're at spiritually and making sure that you're nurtured and nourished at a spiritual level. You know, that's one level of preconception care. Then there's the therapeutic layer, which is my job, making sure that women have a really stable, strong, healthy, vibrant menstrual cycle, and that they're ovulating on time, that they have beautiful, beautiful fertile mucus, that their partner has really healthy, fantastic sperm, so that then they'll actually conceive on time at the best time of their cycle to conceive, when the egg and the sperm are at their most vibrant and alive to create that genetic blueprint. And then you've got, you know, the therapeutic care, which can be anything between herbal medicine, flower essences, aromatic medicine, herbal medicine, homeopathics, pretty much you name it. There are foundational, I guess, universal principles of preconception care that I follow. So even though every couple that I see, I treat very individually, I treat them individually as a couple, as a team and a unit, and then I treat them individually as the male and the female partner. But there are those underlying foundational principles that follow through for every single preconception protocol that you do, and they are stable and they're kind of known. So, you know, that's why I'm so passionate about doing preconception care.
And it's important for men to do it as well, basically, you're saying?
Well, yes, absolutely, because, you know, the male partner is 50% of that genetic blueprint. And I think there's a misconception in community as a general thing that fertility is largely the province of women. Yeah. And it's very tricky because women carry a baby, they conceive a baby, they miscarry a baby, and it's very easy to see that the issue with miscarriages or with failure to conceive is sitting in the feminine. In reality, masculine fertility is a massive contributing factor. Yeah. And when you look at the statistics, it's a very, very strong component. And, you know, again, what men often don't understand is that they can have a massive impact on the health and well-being of their own babies, and they can have a massive impact on resolving male fertility problems. You know, I see men all the time. I see, you know, many men a week who come to me because they've either been diagnosed with some form of fertility challenge for themselves, or their partner has, or they've been trying to conceive unsuccessfully. And I'm really clear that it's really, really important for the male partner to have a proper semen analysis done through an IVF laboratory, not at a GP. It's inconclusive, and you get lots of false positives and lots of false negatives in GP laboratory semen analysis. You really have to have a semen analysis done under referral with a really good IVF clinic that does lots and lots and lots of semen analysis. And then you get, you know, then you'll get an accurate reading. And then again, naturopathic care comes into its own actually in male fertility, because there's really nothing that the Orthodox system can offer men who have fertility challenges except IVF or ICSI. And the statistics for success are pretty low. Whereas with naturopathic medicine, I do this, you know, multiple times a year. I've lost count of actually having a man who presents with, you know, a shocking semen analysis, and 6 to 8 months later, it's completely normal.
Wow.
Okay. Sam, would you mind maybe explaining some of the testing? Because I know that as a parent and as a wife and all those other things, I've had to drag my husband along. He's an engineer, he's calculated, he's mathematical, he's scientific. He likes the cause and effect, and he likes to be able to join the dots and see the results.
Yeah.
What sort of testing is there, and does that help then explain their position or give them a sense of power and onus or control over their bodies then? Does that open up a doorway for them as well?
Look, I mean, every week in my clinic I see couples that present with, what would be less than favourable, test results.
That's not just semen results. That's gut microbes, and what other things do you look for, and what other testing materials do you use or labs?
If anybody presents with fertility challenges, and I suspect even slightly that they have gut integrity issues, I always send them off for gut microbial ecology profiles to assess their bacterial, yeast, protozoa, amoebas, parasites, and I deliberately choose a test that's very, very accurate, because they can be led down a garden path with lots of false positives and negatives if they don't do really accurate testing. I highly recommend that if anybody presents with symptoms of food intolerances, or if they've got any food allergies, that we do IgG food antibody testing. The reason that I do those tests, even though they're very expensive and they are not available on Medicare, is because you get a very, very high level of accuracy, and it gives people the opportunity then to make really grounded fundamental changes into their diet and lifestyle and actually heal that once and for all. And be in a position, it takes generally between 4 to 6 months to really heal the gut. And that's with, that's intensive therapeutic care. So I distinguish in my practice between what I call self-care and wellness care, which is all of the work that my clients do at home. That's what they choose to eat every day. That's how many hours they choose to sleep. That's how many hours they choose to exercise over a week. That's whether or not they're engaging in meditation or prayer or some sort of spiritual practice for themselves. That's how they manage their stress. But the therapeutic intervention is utilising naturopathic medicines, whichever modality is the best for that person, to actually recover and heal that particular tissue or that particular organ or that particular system of the body. And so because I understand that there's such a correlation between gastrointestinal health and fertility, and gastrointestinal health and the endocrine system, it's really one of the core foundations of my work. And then the preconception care, what I call the preconception care workups, are assessing all of your vitamin and mineral status. They're assessing you hormonally. They're assessing thyroid function. They're assessing multiple other potential contributing factors that can undermine fertility or contribute to fertility illness patterns. And for the male, exactly the same sort of protocol, but also doing a semen analysis to assess for count, to assess for morphology, which is the shape of the sperm, to assess for motility, which is how well that sperm move and whether or not they move forward. Because it's pretty important that sperm know how to swim in a forward direction and that they can do it pretty fast. If they're swimming sideways or backwards, they're not going to get to the egg.
Okay. All
so,
right.
From that perspective, the work that I do clinically is very grounded. It's very objective. I make sure that we actually get very grounded, objective results that people can actually look at and go, okay, well, that's the reason that this is happening. Or at absolute best case scenario, you do all of the preconception care workup and they come through clear as a whistle. And then we're like, okay, well then if everything here is clear, then what's happening? So it gives me a way of actually having a plan naturopathically that I can follow step by step by step. And I just basically tick off a whole lot of boxes. It's my job to basically make sure that all of my clients have been thoroughly assessed, not only at an orthodox medical level, but at what I call a functional biochemical level. We want to go into that, that conception period of time, knowing that there's nothing that's going to get in our way. Okay. And I think that that's very empowering, because
definitely.
No matter what comes up, we can address it. I've shared, I see so many men that have come to me, and, I've had men break down in tears in my office because they've got such an appalling semen analysis. And they're like, we haven't got a prayer of conceiving. And I'm like, well, actually, that's incorrect. You do have a prayer. Let's talk about what we can do, and let's talk about the possible outcomes and the possible results, and let's track this so that you feel confident and you feel competent about what you're doing, and then let's reassess it. I see this month after month, year after year. I've got, hundreds and hundreds of families now, probably thousands of families.
Yeah.
Who have had 1, 2 or 3 or 4 babies.
Wow.
That's why I love my job. It'll make me cry if you keep up.
Yeah, I was thinking that. You must get amazing feedback.
It's the most beautiful thing in the world. I'm like actually tearing up now.
Yeah.
There's just nothing more rewarding than having a couple walk through with a newborn baby into my clinic.
I'd be bawling all the time.
I do. I frequently, my clients and I laugh about it. They're like, okay, we don't want to make you cry. I'm like, it's happy tears. I'm really happy.
Oh, that's so
on
good.
the lighter side, so just popping into my head, because that's what things do. I am now starting to understand that preconception care for men is just like gym for the testicles.
Yes, good.
They knock off work and they go to the gym and they have their, I don't know what they have, but, they have their creatine and they have their thermogenics and they've got their protein powder and they've got it all, calculated in, organised. They know exactly what they're doing.
Totally.
It's this preconception care is just like that. It's like they've sort of neglected a very vital part of their body, and you're bringing them back to essentially, the most vital part of them for sending on the next most powerful generation, so they can go about their working life and enjoy who they are in a functional manner.
Yeah, absolutely. And I often joke with my clients that I wish that, if I had a magic wand, I'd actually have ejaculate be coloured according to the integrity of the sperm, so that they could actually see it, that they could see, okay, we have a problem, Houston, or excellent, we're good to go. Because for men, part of this is that it's all in the realm of the invisible. They can't actually see. When women have fertility problems, if you have endometriosis, you know that you've got a problem. Mm-hmm. If you have polycystic, you're having limiting, painful, distressing sort of symptoms that are telling you that there's something not happening in a balanced and healthy way with your reproductive system. With men, it's not so. Men can still be vibrantly sexually active, having a wonderful sex life with their partner, still functioning at work, having great health in the rest of their health, and having sperm that are really distressed and upset, and they don't know.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess that's part of my job, is to raise awareness. And that's why I, strongly, strongly encourage any of the couples that come to see me that the male partner is fully investigated at the same time as the female partner is. Mm. It's absolutely and utterly devastating for couples to go through preconception care, to be in what I call trying to conceive phase. And I literally had this only happen last week. I'd been working with this couple for a year. She has some very, very serious fertility issues, and he was a great example of a bloke that was like, it's got nothing to do with me.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
And, we've really made major changes for her, and her cycle is now beautiful and stable. They've been trying to conceive now for 6 months, and they haven't conceived. And finally, he agreed to do a semen analysis. And as I predicted, it's a shocking result. You know, the sad thing for me is that if he'd been willing to do that semen analysis a year ago, they would have conceived by now. I feel really confident, because we would have, the issues that he had with his semen are environmentally based. They are to do with toxicity. He has a high risk job, and I just haven't been able to get through his male brain. That sounds awful. I should just retract that. But, you know, I
think all the women sitting here are nodding.
I failed miserably at getting through to him how important it was. And in some ways, it had to be his choice. He had to get to the place in his world where he was willing. But now we're sort of not back to square one, but now we're going to need to do some fairly significant therapeutic care for him to get his semen and his sperm up to a normal level where he'll be able to conceive. And I know that he'll be able to do that. I know that we'll achieve that, because it's not a structural issue. It's not, you know, it's a preventable issue. But it hurts my heart when I see that, because there's just so much heartbrokenness involved in wanting to conceive a baby desperately and not conceiving. Yeah. And it's so much of it is preventable.
Can you explain a little bit, just on the bring it down to very practical everyday stuff, what kind of foods are good? I've had this question a few times on my chat group and on my Facebook page, for people who've had infertility, and one lady said she tried for 6 years and she tries to eat very natural foods, and other one had said she's got autoimmune diseases and all sorts of problems. What should I eat? They all ask, what should I be eating? Is there things that you shouldn't be eating and should be eating? Can you explain a little bit about that kind of thing? I know you would go into a lot more detail in your practice, but maybe just a bit of an overview.
Look, at a core level, a diet that supports fertility and reproductive health is clean, it's whole, and it's nourishing. Yeah. So we're talking about an absence of packaged foods, you know, food-based chemicals. We're talking about a whole food diet. So I am a strong advocate for organics and biodynamics, not just for the environmental sustainability and the environmental philosophy behind that, but because the agrochemicals that are left as residues in particularly our protein-based foods, our dairy and our meats and our poultry and all of those kind of foods, they leave residues that are what we call endocrine disruptors. And so women who are in that preconception phase, who are thinking about having children, it's pretty important to make that transition wherever you possibly can to an organic diet. And I understand that, you know, everybody has different food budgets, and that for some people, you know, 100% organic is just not possible. In that case, you know, I recommend that if at all possible, your meat and your dairy, if you're eating meat and dairy, is organic. And then there are some fabulous websites on the net that actually go through which are the cleanest foods conventionally. And I recommend that people look at those sites. And, you know, I would go with, you know, organic leafy greens, for instance. That's super important because they're the ones that are the most highly sprayed. So at that level, we're looking at an organic diet. We're looking at a whole food diet, so fresh fruit and vegetables with a focus on antioxidant-rich fruit and veggies. So all of your leafy greens, eating a big, huge salad at least once a day, beautiful, clean, vibrant protein. I'm a great advocate of bone broths and the Western A. Price sort of food philosophy. I'm really into organic saturated fats for women because they are the building blocks of our hormones. So you can't make estrogen and progesterone without really good quality fat in your body. It's just not possible. So, you know, I'm a big fan of grass-fed meat, grass-fed dairy. I'm a big fan of fermented dairy foods, yogurt, kefir. I'm a huge fan of fermented butter. I'm a huge... Oh, my gosh, I could just eat
I could eat it by the spoonful.
I know.
I'm not at the moment, Leah, don't worry.
And so, really beautiful, healthy fats are incredibly important. Lots and lots of leafy greens. Your low GI fruits are pretty important so that you're not elevating your blood sugars too much.
And then your nuts and berries and things like that.
Nuts and seeds, activated nuts and seeds, really important. And again, what you said, Leah, berries are super important. Any of your really antioxidant, anti-inflammatory foods, and then being hydrated with really good clean water. So beautiful filtered water and herbal teas made with filtered water, water kefir, coconut water kefir, big fan of coconut yolk, coconut oil, coconut water. And in saying that, it's very, very important that all of the foods that I've talked about are referenced through, do I have an allergy to this? Is this a contributing food to something that is a health concern for me? So, if you know that you're intolerant to dairy or you have an allergic picture, that's where I would come in and do food antibody testing to make sure that none of the foods that women and men are eating are actually a contributing allergen that's going to elevate inflammation.
I think she's talking to you.
Yeah, I know. I'm not eating butter right now.
Only because it makes you sneeze.
I know. And makes
Joe
my legs
Witten,
itch.
darling.
Yes?
Joe Witten, darling, I've sent you your test kits. Just
Yoo-hoo.
saying.
Just saying.
They're on the way.
So set aside the morning, some time. This is important. This takes precedence.
Yes.
Okay, Leah, we can't gang up on Joe in a public domain. That's not fair.
Why not?
You can. Everyone will have a good
This is helping
laugh.
my cause. It's brilliant.
Too funny.
It's reaffirming.
So, basically the diet that you promote on Quirky Cooking, whole food, prepared from scratch, beautiful culinary herbs, lots of spices, lots of really good home cooking and smart home cooking, working smarter, not harder in the kitchen. That's why I absolutely adore, cherish and, revere my Thermomix. It makes my life so easy. I don't know what I would do without it.
Well, we're trying to cut down stress too, aren't we?
Exactly.
So guys who are listening to this, if you haven't bought your partner a Thermomix, this is the time to do it. They need less stress in their life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The Thermomix is one of my favourite, actual health tools. I don't see it as just a kitchen appliance. No. It's one of the tools and resources that give people the ability to create vibrant health, just purely because of how you can process food with it. So, at a preconception care level, we're also really avoiding what I call the social poisons. So, we don't know what the safe levels of these things are. We just know that they have a significantly detrimental effect on fertility and particularly have a detrimental effect in terms of miscarriages. So as a general rule of thumb, I highly recommend that women and men who are embarking into that preconception period of time, that 4 to 6 months of time before they're even thinking about conceiving a baby, completely and utterly avoid all coffee, all alcohol, all refined and processed sugar products, that they avoid all processed and refined grains. I'm not a fan of grain. I just see so many pervasive health concerns arising from grain, use in a diet. And that being said, there are some of my clients who have zero issues with grain. And if that's so, then I encourage them to have whole grains and to rotate their grains.
Yeah, not just wheat flour all the time.
Yeah, if you're going to have grain, and in fact the vast majority of your protein foods, it's really wise to rotate them.
Yeah.
The reason that we've got into such a massive mess with our diet as a population is because we have a mono diet that's based upon highly processed wheat products and highly processed dairy products.
Yep.
When you actually analyse the vast majority of people's diet, you're looking at wheat, dairy, wheat, dairy, wheat, dairy, wheat, dairy.
Yep, and that's how I got sick.
And a tiny little smidgen of meat thrown in there for good measure, and if they're lucky, a bit of salad wafts over the top of their plate.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just garnish. That just sits on the side to make you feel good
That's
that
right.
you've actually seen a bit of green for the day.
That's right.
Oh my gosh, don't get me started. I'm holding my head with one hand on my forehead, one hand behind the back of my skull, in horror. It's just,
Yeah.
I have days where I have to walk into my dispensary and I have to take 10 calming breaths because I've just listened to what somebody's eating, and I'm just like, it's a miracle that you're standing up. It's a miracle that you're still breathing. Let's just try and figure out how to nourish you, because you are not nourishing yourself.
Yes.
So does that answer your question, Leah, about a preconception care or a pregnancy care, or actually just a life diet? This isn't just about preconception care, pregnancy, birthing, bonding.
No.
It's about a foundation of health for life.
Yeah, and I love all of that, because it's essentially, the message is that if you're just eating a real food diet, you're looking after your sleep, you're looking after your exercise, you're looking after spirituality, you're looking after all those things, your social and emotional, as well as your environmental stuff. You might not even have to go down the road of preconception care. If you have a teenager and you're doing all that and you're instilling that in them at that level, then by the time they get to adulthood, they shouldn't be damaged and they shouldn't need these things. They should still obviously take into account their lifestyle and supplements and all those other things, but they get to your point, to your practice, with less damage and less that needs undoing.
Yeah.
And, in an ideal world, we wouldn't need preconception care. In fact, if I had it all my way, I wouldn't have a job.
Yeah, that's right.
I've often had, clients say, Sam, you basically do yourself out of a job all the time, because I have such a passion for wellness, and my clients get well and then they don't need to see me anymore, which is kind of counterproductive.
That's
the reason why you took it on.
That's right.
You're there. You're the facilitator of wellness. You just want everyone living their most healthy.
Exactly. That's my job. My job is to create it so that clients never need to see me again. And my job then is what I call keeping them clean and sober. So, I see my wellness clients once every 3 months, because they know that they're coming to see me and they know that I'm going to look at them and say, what's going on?
Keeping them accountable, which is what I find very helpful.
I'm their accountability partner, and I'm their coach, and I'm their support person and their major cheerleader. Yep. And, we transition out of that intensive therapeutic care into a model of well-being and living your best life.
Because it is so easy to know all this and do your best while when you're noticing that you've got all these problems, or you're trying to get pregnant or whatever, to work really hard on it. And then when things seem to be going well, it's human nature to go, I'm okay now, I can let it slip a bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's really
sort of go backwards.
It's pretty funny. I regularly have clients who come back for a repeat visit, and they sort of sit down and they say something to the effect of, yep, I know exactly what you're going to say. I haven't been doing anything that you taught me, and now I'm in trouble. Yep. Can you help me? And
I've done it myself with my naturopath.
We just have we end up in hysterics together, and I get them back on track, or support them to reignite their passion for their health and well-being, and look at what's going on that's unraveling that for them, and we get back on track. That's human nature.
It is.
It's not about being perfect, right and done. And I also sort of want to speak to that a little bit, because it's very easy to think that preconception care is this completely overwhelming, perfectionistic thing that you have to do that's full on and intense, especially given what I've spoken about. But it's really not. It requires deliberate, conscious attention, but it's building something that's really foundational and really powerful into the core of your life. And it doesn't have to be stressful. It can actually be fun. And, my partner, James, we both work from home, and he often remarks that, the thing that he hears most in my clinic is laughter. And he says, good. You laugh so much with your clients. And I'm like, well, health is funny. You know, like if we can't laugh about things and if we can't, you know, have fun and enjoy this journey that we're all on, then it's a pretty sad and sorry state of affairs.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's also about making it functional, making it practical, and making it achievable and workable for people so that I meet them where they're at. I make sure that whatever we do, they can manage. Yeah. It's pointless me putting the absolute ideal textbook preconception care program in play for them if they can't sustain it. Yeah. But for me, it's about empowerment. It's about informed consent. It's about informed decision making so that they're partners with me. We create a team so that we're working together to support them to win, to support them to get the very best out of what they have the capacity to hold and carry. And therefore, you know, it's actually a really inspiring and optimistic and hopeful journey that they go on.
It is very inspiring. I
love my job.
Oh, it's just amazing. And I'm really inspired to really start teach. I've got a 17-year-old daughter, and I've obviously been teaching her about healthy eating and stress management and sleep and all those sorts of things. But this has really inspired me to, you know, make sure that she understands all this. This is the age where she needs to be knowing all this back to front. She needs to know it now.
Oh, let's talk about that later, Jo.
Okay.
My favourite thing to do is actually to support teenage girls.
Yeah.
You know, that for me is true preventative reproductive endocrinology.
If
I can actually nurture and support a girl between the ages of 12 to 17, then she will never have to have a fertility problem.
Exactly.
Hopefully. You know, unless she has a very strong family history. But as we've talked about, you know, with epigenetics and genetic coding, it's entirely possible to keep that at its absolute bare minimum so that it doesn't ever have to fully manifest.
Yeah.
You know,
I just have to say, I want to go and have another baby. I feel it. I want to do it right.
Start again.
I've got these 2 kids that I've had to unpackage and learn what they're about because they don't fit the parenting books and they don't hit the milestones and all those other things. And I want to do it right.
It does make you want
to start to finish.
I had a dreadful time with breastfeeding my last 2, and I didn't know about all this natural health stuff until a year after when my youngest was a year old. And I started going to a naturopath and getting help and everything with my health. And I suddenly said to him one day, "Could you have helped me with all the trouble I had with breastfeeding my kids?" And he said yes, and I just nearly cried because it was such a stressful time.
I don't feel the mummy guilt about it.
No, I don't feel guilty.
I'm excited. After hearing Sam, I'm excited that so many people, they've got that
opportunity.
And they do. And can you imagine how many people we are going to have, you know, influenced, I suppose, just in this podcast, just in this short amount of time that we've spent with Sam.
I was just wishing I could try again because, you know, back then I was thinking if I did it again and I had all this help of a naturopath, imagine what I could do, what we could do, what could happen. But I'm happy. My kids are...
I want to speak to that a little bit because I know that we're going to have a lot of mums who are going to be in the same place that you're in. And I think that, you know, all of our children are so unique and so special. And, you know, even if you've had a child who has had some significant health problems, I mean, I think about it really differently. I look at you, Jo, and I look at you, Leah, and I see mums who are pioneers. I see mums who are leaders. I see mums who are health advocates. And if you had both had, you know, what I fondly call the textbook perfect baby, which actually doesn't exist.
No, of course not.
Just say, for instance, both of you had that, you would never, ever have been on the journey that either of you are on now, and you wouldn't be in the place to actually support and nurture and care for all of the other women out there who are going to be going through this journey just like you because they didn't know what they didn't know.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I always think that it's a massive blessing in disguise as sometimes something that's really challenging when we have these beautiful children that are born with health issues.
Yeah.
You know, when I talked about the little kids that are working with me that have cystic fibrosis. You know, as a result of that, I now have a whole group of little CF kids. Yeah. Now, if that couple hadn't had those beautiful babies, then all of the other babies that have been born after the twins would never have had access to the things that they now have access to. And it's because people have the courage to actually speak out and say and look at a different way or search a different way out. And that makes all of us, it enriches everybody. So I always think that, you know, those children are really precious and special. They're our teachers, and they're our little lighthouses and our trailblazers. And who knows what will happen as a result of, you know, this massive increase in autoimmune diseases and, you know, autism and Asperger's and all of those sort of neurological health challenges that our children are starting to have at an increasing rate. If we didn't have all of these children, we wouldn't be looking so deeply into diet, lifestyle, the environment, the immune system. We wouldn't have a need. So I think we have to always be mindful of it being a gift as much as it is a challenge. Yeah. You know, I think
one thing that we need to finish off here, but I might just quickly mention when we were going through such a hard time with my son, with his health and the anxiety and the depression, and my 17-year-old daughter came to me one day and she said, "Mum, I found this quote that's just for you," and it said, your most effective ministry will come out of your deepest hurts. And I just cried. I was like, that is so true. You know, it's it's the hard things that you go through that's why you want to help others to get through the same thing. And if it didn't happen, all those other people may not have had the help that you're giving them in some small way.
Yeah, and I think when women often look back at their own biography, they'll see points in their life where they've experienced tragedy or major challenge or heartbrokenness, and with the benefit of hindsight and healing, many years later they'll realise that there was a very profound reason for that to happen.
I'm a big believer in there's always a reason.
Yeah, there's always a purpose. There's always meaning in something, and it's just a matter of looking for it and looking at how you can be transformative in it. And, you know, that's really, you know, the direction that I believe that, you know, our society and our culture and humanity is going towards is, you know, really starting to live healthier and happier lives, but out of a real place of consciousness and empowerment and clarity, rather than just, you know, the old way of doing it the way it's always been done.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Thank you so much. Leah, do you have anything else you want to say?
No, I'm crying.
Oh, you darling.
Oh, darling. I know we're all
That was too much. That was just too much.
It was beautiful, wasn't it? Thank you so much, Samantha. And guys, everyone who's listening, I know you're thinking we need Samantha on here more. Don't worry. She'll be back. Samantha.
She's booked in. She's not going anywhere. We know her Skype address.
That's right. And we've got at least another 5 podcasts we wanted to answer questions on.
You both are too beautiful for words. It's like, I'll just finish off to sort of say that, you know, when I first met Jo, we were at a whole food cooking event, we were both bonding over a Thermomix and sharing recipes, and we've sort of texted each other back and forth recipes over the last several years. And, you know, when I first met Jo, I felt like I'd met a beautiful kindred spirit and a sister, and, you know, we just had this really beautiful connection. And then when Jo said to me, "You've got to speak to my friend Leah," I think the first time that Leah and I were on the phone together, we spoke for something ridiculous like 2 hours, and I actually had to get off the phone because I had a client, you know, walking down the garden path towards the clinic. And I have to admit, I was disappointed. I was like, damn, why aren't they late? I just want to keep talking to Leah forever.
Yeah, and you weren't dressed. You were like,
I wasn't dressed.
I'm not dressed. I've got clients.
I was sitting here in my pajamas, which is one of the great benefits of working from home. And I literally had to pelt upstairs, throw clothes on and pelt down the stairs trying to look professional. Like I've been like this all morning. No. 2 seconds before I was sitting at my computer basically in my jammies. And then I think the second or third time that Leah and I talked, we actually had to discipline ourselves to get off the phone because we just couldn't stop talking to each other. So on that note, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure and a joy to hang out with you tonight. And I can't wait to share, with you some more about reproductive medicine and how we can support the quirky cooking women at a health level. And Joe and I have some plans cooking in the background to support all of you at an even higher level. So just watch this space. We'll be doing something pretty cool in the new year. We just have to get all our little ducks in a row, so to speak.
We do. And Samantha's working very hard to get them in a row. Thank you, Sam. You're such an angel.
You're so welcome. Beautiful night. Thank you so much, beautiful girls.
Thank you. And everybody, we would love to hear your feedback. If you want to send any questions or comments, you can do that on our Facebook pages. Samantha, what's your Facebook page? Do you want to just mention that?
My clinic Facebook page is The Alchemist Tree, and I just want to put a proviso on that I am like a social media reader, so I always feel a little bit embarrassed I just don't get this whole social media thing. I'm having to learn it as fast as I possibly can, but I'm actually a little bit of a slow learner at this. So if you post on my page and I don't get back to you, it's there, so you can definitely find me.
And you can always make an appointment with Samantha through your website as well, can't you? You've got your contact details on there. The Alchemist Tree.
The easiest way for people to connect with me is to just do a private message to me, either on my personal page, which is Samantha Bulloch, or on the Alchemist Tree. And I usually do everything by email. So, I'm happy to do that. I'm on the Gold Coast, so I have clients coming to see me from Brisbane, the Sunshine Coast, basically all over. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to see.
And you do Skype consultations too, I think you said?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I do Skype consults. So I'd love to support anyone who needs that sort of more grounded naturopathic care.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right,
guys,
lots of love. Good night.
Yes, good night. And guys, don't forget you can leave a comment also on the website, thewellnesscouch.com/A Quirky Journey. And we would love for you to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, and also check out thewellnesscouch.com, where you can view the entire range of wellness podcasts available. So until next week, let's just continue on with those little steps towards wellness. And thank you so much for being here with us on this journey. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Hi, it's Damien Christoph here. 2015 marks perhaps the most important event the Wellness Couch has ever conducted. We've had 2 sold-out wellness summits these last years, but honestly, nothing will come close to our first ever wellness breakthrough. Your favourite Wellness Couch experts, the Up for a Chat girls, Quirky Cooking's Joe Whitten, Stu Hayes, Marcus Pearce, and of course the Wellness guys, are all gathering in Dandenong Ranges for 3 days and 2 nights for one incredible event. If you want possibly the greatest peer group in health and wellness to help you catapult your life to the next level, then we'd love to see you at the Wellness Breakthrough in February. For more information, go to www.thewellnesscouch.com. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.